What's up, everybody? Welcome to Are You Down with LPT, the podcast where agents like you share their stories, experiences, and insights to help each other level up and thrive. In every episode, we're diving deep into the real-life challenges, wins, and lessons from the front lines. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, this is the place to connect, learn, and grow together. So, if you're ready to get down with LPT and take your game to the next level, let's jump in. All right, welcome back to Are You Down with LPT? I am here this morning with the Managing Director of Sales and Development for Legacy, Tracey Carr, in her new role. Welcome, Tracey.
Thanks.
Excited. Well, excited to have you in the role, so appreciate that. Long time coming, but excited for what's to come for sure. Today, I know you at team meetings a couple weeks ago talked about the NAR profile of buyers and sellers, which is, it's basically... It's kind of like the Bible for us real estate agents. If you want to know what's going on, client behavior, consumer behavior, that's where you find it, right?
It is, yeah. NAR does a great job of getting, a lot of surveys and kind of looking at all the data and then putting it into a nice 118-page profile for buyers and sellers for 2025. So
I used to, and I was thinking about this when I was looking through it, is I used to teach classes not off of this because it is so much great information. Why do you think, like for agents, why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think knowing where buyers are coming from, knowing how to market to them and how to stand out in competition. I think knowing what sellers are looking for so that you can, make your listing presentation kind of fit that. And really what are buyers and sellers looking for and how can you fill that void?
Yeah. Great data. I would suggest if, Tracey, I put that in the Iowa Circle in LPT Connect, and it is there. You can download it. Otherwise, it costs you $20 as a member, and I think it's like $200 if you're not a member. So, but it's free if you jump into LPT Connect and grab that. Would encourage you. Great data in there. I want to talk about buyers and sellers in general, and we'll get into some things starting with maybe age, first time home buyer data, things like that. Some stats that stuck out to me. You had a median home buyer age was 59, highest ever. Median first-time buyer age, 40, highest ever. And only 21% of the market share were first-time home buyers. Historically, that sits, around 40. Looking back, it shows the data that it's been as high as 50% that was first-time home buyers. And here we are sitting at an all-time low of 21%. So as you look at those stats, Tracey, what sticks out to you most about that?
So I think that 40 median age, even though I do think that locally in our Iowa market, we're probably not seeing 40. This is on a national basis, but still having that median age be the highest it's ever been, I think it's important for agents to focus on the things that a 40-year-old as a first-time home buyer is going to be looking for, right? Maybe their forever home is what you're going to be talking about to a first-time home buyer. Talking about, financing, maybe going in a little bit deeper into that and having that knowledge and being able to share with them, teaching them about how, their credit card debt, because that's the highest it's been as well. And how, you need to keep that under 30%, on any card. So just those things I think is important to be able to focus on, upgrading from apartment or a small house, right? And balancing their needs and the affordability of it. Rent versus buy, of course, is going to probably stick out really, well to somebody that's, closer to 40. They're going to understand that maybe more, that, hey, you're just paying somebody else's mortgage, right? You're paying a mortgage, just somebody else's.
I think one of the first things my dad taught me was he had those two worksheets, rent versus buy and the cost of waiting. Not something used a lot recently, but probably a tool we need to have in our arsenal because it definitely comes into play these days. I think when COVID hit and the market got crazy, just some basic tools we got away from that we probably need to start implementing a little bit. Sticking with that first-time home buyer, what do you think so nationally that number's 40, it's going to be lower here, but what are the challenges that younger buyers face that keep them out of the market?
Well, from what I'm hearing is just the job market in
Hmm.
general, right? People are coming out of college and they're not finding that job right away. That's why they're staying in their
Yeah.
parents' basement. I think that's why that 40-year-old is now more the first-time home buyer. So I think that that's a challenge. So again, if you can partner with a great lender and do some, buyer training seminars, and my recommendation is do it off-site, right? It seems like that helps, like a library, a restaurant in their back room or what have you. I think that is great to start educating and then helping, because it's a long process. The average buyer takes about 10 weeks to find a home. So you need to stay with them, stay in contact with them, and really set yourself apart as the expert and their guide, right?
Yep.
That's what they're looking for.
I think great points. I think it's 10 weeks from when they actually get into the market and start looking. I think of how many people that probably got priced out during COVID or after COVID. You start looking for a house after COVID. The rates have gone up, the prices have gone up. And so, us as agents, I think this is an opportunity. Those people, and this is why that number 21% of first time home buyers, where it's been as
Mhm.
high as 50, that affordability is an issue. There's been people that were priced out of the market. And if rates can trickle down a little bit as they've done, and I think they'll continue to do, hopefully, I think there's a opportunity for us. There's a lot of first time home buyers out there that have been on the sideline, and they might be living at their parents because they don't have a job, or they're living at their parents because they just can't afford,
Right.
to buy a house, or they're in an apartment because they can't afford to buy a house. I think there's an opportunity for us as agents to identify who that market is, because 21% is not normal. And as it gets, hopefully becomes a little more affordable, that
Mhm.
number should go up significantly. So as agents, we need to, I think, kind of think about and concentrate on that first time home buyer market. So talk about the home in general, characteristics of the home. I think a few things to note nationally, the 12% were new construction, 88% were existing. And I looked at that. I'm like, wow, that seemed really low new construction. But I went back and I looked at our MLS the last 4 months, and 18.5% were new, 81.5 existing. So we do more new than most. But you look at our market, it's 35-40% are new construction listings, yet only 18.5% are those buying. That tells me there's opportunity for resales. That's always been a thing, that there's plenty of new construction out there to choose from, but not a lot of retail or resale to choose from. So why do you think those numbers matter?
Well, I think what they're looking for is better overall value and better
Yeah.
prices, right?
Yeah.
And they can get that with an existing home
Yeah.
where, we know new construction, they're pretty much set on their price. They're not going to negotiate much. So when, buyers are looking, I think they're kind of starting to get that, build my own equity,
Yeah.
right? And you can do that a little bit quicker sometimes with an existing home. So,
How do we, as an agent, we think about, hey, I'm going to list a resale home, thinking about a third of the market, more than a third of the market is new construction. Like, we've got to take that into consideration, right? Make sure we price it right, make sure we're competitive in other ways. That's where you talked about price per square foot. Resales are going to stand out. You get more house for the money, established neighborhoods, all that stuff.
more bang for your buck, and
More bang for your buck.
that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like, but the thing is that I think if you're representing the seller, you need to make sure that, we're not at the time where the house can look any sort of way and a buyer's going to buy,
Yep.
right? We're past that. If you're representing a seller, you need to go in and you need to be the expert in saying, "Hey, you need to do this, this, and this to get
Yeah.
your home sold." You know,
Yeah.
the quickest and for the most amount of money, right? And sometimes, if you've got good contractors that you can refer them to, fresh coat of paint, new carpet, just those little things to kind of shine it up. Everybody wants a shiny penny,
Yeah.
so especially now.
Yeah, 8, 9, 10. I'd come in with this is a list, and you probably need to do everything on that list. Then COVID happens. They're like, well, you could, I guess, maybe clean it if you need to, but And we're getting back, it's certainly not 8, 9, 10, but we're getting back to more, it's a normal market. And you need to do these things to, one, bring your more money for your house, help it sell quicker, all that stuff. Important.
Well, and the thing I think that you can always say is, and it's always important to show what their competition is, right? You're not only going to show them what's sold and what's pending, but you also need to show them what's active on the market, because either your home is going to help sell theirs or their home is going to help sell yours.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Talk a little bit about the home search process for buyers. First stat that stuck out to me is 54% started online. 46% said, hey, they started looking for properties. 8% started looking for, just data on the process, how to do it, but they started online. So I for us as agents, how do you read that? 54% start online. What does that mean for us?
Well, I think, again, when you're working with buyers, they're starting online, but this is where they need you as their guide and their advisor and being knowledgeable about the market, because what they're seeing, the best houses, a lot of times don't even hit the market, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why you need to position yourself that way. We talked a little bit about this in business planning last week, is that I think it's important to use the concierge mode in Matrix, because by putting the concierge mode on, you're getting the listings first. You can look through that listing, you can verify that it meets the needs of your buyer, and then you can send that to them. Because that's where you're showing your value, right? Because anybody can just set up a search and just throw houses at somebody. They can do that themselves, right? Why do they need you? They need you because you're the one that's actually going to be listening to them, listening to their needs, and sending them only those homes that fit that criteria.
Yeah, I what a great touch point. We have so much set and forget in this business, which is, you need some of that stuff, for your process. But the more of those personal touches you can get, the better off you're going to be. I look at this number, and this is where comes personal touch matters. 54% are starting online. And how many times we hear, man, God, I would have used you, but I walked into an open house, or I jumped on Zillow or whatever, and one thing happened and I bought a house. And it said 20% contacted their agent directly before they went online. That's not a very big number, only 20% doing that. And so I think one of the takeaways looking at that for me is, as agents, we need to find those touch points. I'm not even talking during the process, before they're ever starting the process. How do I make sure I'm top of mind to them? And this is the time of year to do it. You build those things out. We're talking this week in our team meetings about your marketing and just touching those up. If 54% are starting online, your website, Zillow, Realtor, Homes.com, all those need to be touched up so you have a presence there. I think that's really important.
And I think, too, when you're using social media, those call to actions, right? To not just have people scroll past your stuff. It's not just a matter of being there. It's the engagement.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. One of the things they talked about in this report was the hardest parts of the process. And this is where I think about being a professional, knowing what you do, standing out, doing it right. And here were the three stats, or three percentages. Hardest parts is what a buyer said of the process. 54% finding the right home. And you just talked about that. Part of what we do is finding that right property. You talked about concierge mode. I talked with another agent this morning that was talking about networking with other real estate agents to finding inventory to hit the market before it ever comes on, right? And if we are working with our buyers to find stuff that maybe we can get them in before it's ever hit the market, but 54% finding the right home. And so one of our biggest jobs is, we got other things we got to do, but is finding that right home for them, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to join, our weekly meetings, because a lot of those conversations happen right there in those meetings.
Yeah. The number 2 and number 3 on that, 18% said paperwork, 15% said understanding the process. So you got a third of the people buying a house comes down to paperwork and process, which is a pretty high number considering 54% was about actually finding a home. And so what they're looking for in that agent is someone who understands the paperwork, who understands the process, can help them guide it through it. Like, this is the largest investment that people make. We're to be the professional in this and help them through it.
And I think it's important too to know your stats, right? And pay attention to your stats when it comes to negotiating. I know, quite a few of our agents really, hang their hat on the fact that, you know what, when I represent a buyer, I can do a great job getting them into a home, whether that's the initial price or when it comes to, negotiating those inspection items.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next one, home buyers and real estate professionals. Couple key stats. The first one, and you can tell me what you think, 88% of buyers used an agent, which is a pretty high number. I saw year-over-year stats that, I don't know if they've been tracking the data. It was mid-70s, and, Zillow comes along and Realtor.com comes along, and that number of people that have actually used an agent has climbed. I think because they're connecting with agents online where maybe they weren't before, but 88% is a pretty big number, right?
It is. Yeah, and I mean that's good for us, and it's a reason why you can't be a secret agent, right? You got
Yeah.
to make sure that people know what you do and know how you do it and why they should use you over somebody else because they're going to use somebody.
Yeah. There's the stat that talks about agent communication. I think it was page 59 on it, but here are some things. Importance of agent communications. I think one of the biggest complaints we hear in real estate is agents just don't get back to me, or they're not timely in their communication. I don't know what percentage of this job is communication. If you want to be great in real estate, to be a great communicator, I think, in how you communicate, but then in the timeliness of communication. And so here's some stats. Calls personally to inform of activities. 72% said that was important. And the call part, call personally to inform of activities. I think part of our process is we need, even when it's under contract, but we need a process to keep people informed, right? Like they know what's actually going on. 72% sends property info and communicates via text. Found that important. You talked about the concierge mode. That's an awesome way that we can stay in front of it. Sends postings as soon as the property is under contract, listing, all those things. Can send the market reports on recent listings and sales. Sends me emails about specific needs. And then the things that may be less important, has a website, has a mobile site, is active on social media. Like in our minds, those are things we should do, but you realize like the most important part of what we do, what the buyer finds is the most important part is communicating with them.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, what I hear often is that, well, got us under contract, but then I didn't hear from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you spend so much time with them trying to find that perfect home. You find the perfect home, you get them under contract, and then maybe you negotiate the inspection and then it's crickets,
Yeah.
right? And we all know that, we're working behind the scenes trying to get them to close, but they don't necessarily know that. So stay in contact and use checklists,
Yeah.
And use your phone to put dates in. I don't know how many agents I've talked to, and I'm like, well, when are you supposed to have your clear to close by, right? So know your contract, know what's written in there. Make sure you put it in your phone or however you like to, whether you handwrite it out in your plan or whatever. So you know that when that date comes, hey, this is what we're supposed to have, right? And
Yep.
you can do that all along, throughout the whole process and have a checklist and be like, okay, I need to send them out, talk about utilities. We need to talk about,
Yep.
and it's so easy. And there's so many things online that you can find to help you. You don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah.
It's there for you to use. It's just a matter of using it.
I think weekly reminders, and maybe it's every Friday. So once something's under contract, they get an email Friday that says, here's where we're at in the process. And like you said, a reminder about utilities and homeowners insurance and, building out a plan on that and just making sure they get those touch points. Same thing, listings. It's easy not to communicate, especially right now when I talked to a couple agents this morning, 3 agents specifically that are doing a tour today, and they've all had their house on 2 or 3 weeks and had 0 showings. Makes it difficult. House starts sitting on the market. We don't have showings. We don't have good news. And so we got to find ways to communicate what's going on. And like in my mind, it's like, okay, every Friday, let's have that conversation with the seller. And it might be, okay, we've had no showings, but has anything in this price point sold? What's our online activity? And there are ways to communicate beyond, hey, here's the feedback from the showing. whatever. I think as a professional, we need to do those things.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. And sometimes maybe it's just like, hey, I just wanted to check in and, we didn't have a lot of activity this week, but, like Kyle said, nothing sold this week, so it's not just you, it's just kind of where we are in the market. Or maybe it's gives you those opportunities to have those conversations of, hey, before we listed the property, I talked to you that maybe we might need to change the paint color in the kitchen, and you weren't necessarily on board with that. But I think now, since we've been on the market a little bit, we're not seeing the activity we'd like to see. I think maybe we need to revisit that. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of revisit some of those conversations that maybe they didn't want to do initially, but now, they're maybe more open to listen to you, right? So not talking to them, though, thinking that it's just going to get better is not the thing to do.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. I found that in relationships before I got married. I tried to ignore a girl one time thinking she'd eventually just leave me, but eventually I had a tough conversation. And
Which we know how much you love tough conversations.
I love tough conversations, yeah. One more stab before we move on to sellers. When the process was over, 76% of buyers said they would definitely use their agent again, and 15% said they would probably. So 91% of people said they would probably or definitely use their agent again. The number when you go down and look at sellers there is 29% actually use the same agent as they used before. Why is that gap go from 91% to 29%?
Lack of staying in touch.
Yeah. So this comes back to touch point. We talked about it before. 54% are starting their search online and 20% are reaching out to their agent first. Like somehow we need to build process. Once people are in our SOI, we're staying in touch with them. Now, I don't think that numbers, even though 91% said they would use their agent again, people leave out of town, agents aren't in the business. That's never going to be 91%, but it should be a lot higher than 29%. And I think we as agents here at Legacy, we want to find ways that we create a tribe of people who, one, not only would use us again, but two, are going to shout to the world like, hey, you should use my agent. And so that comes back to our processes again, but definitely think that's important. And there's a big disconnect there. Okay, so talk about sellers here. A couple more little points want to hit. Time on the market. I thought this was interesting. 9% of homes were on the market less than 1 week, 34% 1 to 2 weeks, 15% less than a month. So 58% of homes still sold in less than 30 days. And then you get to ones that maybe sat a little bit. So 58% less than 30 days, but then you had many that were kind of lingering. Then to go along with that, sale price. If it sold in less than a month, it was 99%. Sold less than 2 months, it was 96%. If it was longer than 4 months, 94%. So talk about that, Tracey. Time on the market in relation to, sale price to list price to sale price.
Well, I think it's something that we all know, and we try to help our sellers understand, right? That the longer we're on the market, the less we're going to get. And sellers always want to say, hey, let's just try it a little high for a couple weeks. But I think if you can use these graphics in your listing presentation, you can say, hey, here, this is where we need to be in this sweet spot to get your home sold in the least amount of time for the most money. Because it's interesting because Iowans, are not going to lowball.
Yeah.
Oh, they can just bring me an offer. Iowans don't have that mentality. They're afraid of offending you, and they will just continue to look instead of putting an offer in on an overpriced property. So, and then a property will get stigmatized. How many times have you been with clients and it's like, what's wrong with that property? There's nothing wrong with it. They priced it too high. It's a great property, right? So that's why it's so important to make sure that you're pricing it appropriately. And what I recommend too is if you have a client that says, we want to try it high, put in a listing addendum stating, hey, we're going to list it at this for this amount of time, but if we have no offers or still on the market after 2 weeks, then we're going to lower the price to this. And you do that right when you list the property, because guess what? When 2 weeks goes by and you haven't had anything, you can pull that out and say, hey, this is what we agreed upon. Remember, the conversation's already been had. Makes it a lot easier for you as the agent.
Great info there. You talked about price drops in there. Stats they showed 9% of homes had no drops, and you go back to 9% were on the market less than a week. 25% one drops, 15% 2 to 3. 51% of homes that hit the market last year had 4 or more price drops. Les Solgrove, when he was in here talking about, we had, I don't know, it was 15,000 price drops in Des Moines, some multiple times. That's a normal thing right now. And I think as agents, we need to, when we're talking about pricing homes, it's not like COVID. We got to be a little more, I always talk about giving a range. We're in a market where that's probably on the lower side of whatever range we're giving them, and be prepared to drop it. And I think a lot of it for us as agents is to communicate this up front so they know what to expect. Like, I think knowing this data when I go into a listing appointment, like, I don't want to set myself up to fail before we ever started. Like, hey, I'm going to sell this in 1 week or less, when the reality is 51% of homes have had 4 price drops. So know your market, know what's normal in that price point. I think all of those things are important, and be prepared to talk and educate your sellers on it.
Yeah. And when you're doing your CMA, pull those properties that were maybe withdrawn, that didn't sell, or even look back. And I was always really excited if I could find a property that was listed at this price, right? And maybe canceled and then sold at another price, so that I could literally use those both for a sold as a withdrawn and canceled and didn't sell, because that gives you a snapshot of where you shouldn't be, right? These people tested the market here. It didn't work. We know we don't want to be there.
Yeah, that's great info. Just 2 more stats here before we wrap up on the seller side. First one, 91% used an agent. What do you think of that number?
It's great.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't have for sale by owners in kind of your toolbox of calling on them, and as a reminder, you're not calling a for sale by owner to try to get the listing, right? Because if they wanted to list with you, they would. You're there to build a relationship with them, and you're also there to get your foot inside the door. You're the professional, right? How bad is it when you're taking buyers around and they say, well, what about that house over there that's for sale by owner? Well, if you've called that for sale by owner and walked through their home, you can actually talk about that home, and you can say, hey, yeah, I went through that the other day. So literally just call and say, hey, this is Tracey Carr from Legacy Realty of Iowa, LPT. I was wondering if I could preview your home either today at 5 or tomorrow at noon. What works better for you?
Yeah.
Well, do you have a buyer? I don't know yet. I haven't seen your home.
Yeah.
So easy. So easy. And guess what? That's a script.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Need more of that, right? Here's another stat. I think it's good information. 37% they found their agent through a referral. 29%, which we talked about earlier, would use the same agent they used before. That tells me 66%, 2 out of every 3 people used an agent that they either knew or were referred to them. That personal relationship still wins. If you want to be a great listing agent, developing and growing your SOI and developing those professional relationships and personal relationships is going to win you more listings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that has stood out to me, though, is that the average years in a home is 11.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So if you're out there trying to find listings, we used to say 5 to 7 years. You might want to go back and look at people that have been in their homes, 11 years and start reaching out to them. Let them know how much equity they have in their home, right? They probably don't know.
11 years. We got to get that number back to 5 to 7. And I think part of that, what's pushed it up is, 1, affordability we talked about, but 2, people sitting on these interest rates of 3% or less. And, they are staying longer. They might have already moved. And if rates can come back down a little bit, maybe we can bring that number back down a little bit.
But I think it's important, too, to be able to point out to those sellers that, yes, you might have a 3% interest rate, but a 3% interest rate on how much money do you owe after all this amount of time? And is that really the best use of your money if you have all this equity in the house that you're not utilizing?
Yeah.
So
another stat that I crept up from the last time I saw the number, but 80% only interviewed one agent, which is crazy. I think we walk into listing appointments scared, like competing against 5 other people. Now it doesn't. We want to be prepared always. What is it you say when we're going on a listing appointment? treat everybody like they're.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you should always go in thinking that you're in competition,
Yeah.
right? You should never take it for granted. And you should always go in and treat everybody exactly the same and do the exact same listing presentation you would for your best friend as you would, somebody that's got $1 million house that you want their listing, right? Because I've heard agents say, oh, well, I didn't do my entire presentation because it's my best friend. Of course, they were going to list with me. Well, guess what? That best friend comes and says, well, so-and-so came and they had all of this information and they were really well prepared. So I felt like we had to go with them.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's a kick in the face.
Yeah. Yep. Be prepared. Never assume to go win the listing. Last stat, it's why they chose their agent. And it's that old adage that people are going to work with somebody they know, they trust, and they like. And they looked at the top 3%, why they chose their agent. Number 1, 35% reputation. Number 2, honesty and trustworthy at 22%. And number 3, friend or family at 15%, which pretty much covers the no, friend and family, trust, and then like, reputation. I mean, those are the 3 reasons: reputation, honest and trustworthy, family, friend. They know, they trust, and they like you. I think that's going to win the day, right?
Always.
Tracy, appreciate it. There's a lot of great information in here. If they want to find this, again, where can they find the whole report for free?
For free. It is in your Iowa Circle of Connect. So go and find it. And I always have other articles in there, but this has got the full NAR article along with the 118-page PDF that you can download and utilize.
It's great info. If you want people to know, trust, and like you, this is information in there that will help you. And again, strongly encourage, go study it, become a better agent, and win the day. Tracy, thanks for joining us today.
Always.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Are You Down with LPT? Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you get some valuable takeaways to apply to your journey. New episodes drop every Friday, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss out. And hey, if you have your own story you'd like to share or questions you'd like to dive into, hit us up. Until next time, stay down with LPT and keep leveling up. Catch you in the next one.